This episode brought to you by electricity. It's not a joke, it's just a statement.
This is Hot Drop, where we bring you premier PUBG analysis and smoking hot drops. I'm Dano,
And I'm Cody.
and let's get into it. In this episode, we wanted to talk about some of the recent news in the PUBG sphere, hemisphere of PUBG. There is a video that's circulating recently by WTF Moses that talks about tick rate, so we want to dive into that. And we also want to talk about the fact that Polygon.com gave PUBG a 10 out of 10 score in a review. I have a lot to say about that, so let's jump right in. But before we talk about those things, I first want to talk about a blog post that came out on January 5th talking about the updated user report process. So they say, players, as you know, combating cheaters is one of our highest priorities at the moment, and we are doing our best to reduce their numbers down to a minimum. They say they are using an automatic and manual method to continuously detect and deter cheats and their users. And they say that the in-game report function has been helping us greatly throughout this process. All the cheat reports you submit are thoroughly reviewed before any measures are taken. They tell players to use the in-game report player tool to report suspected cheaters, teamers, team killers, and users with improper nicknames. They also say that to provide additional information or report any other violations of their rules of conduct, you can visit the PUBG customer support page, and they have a new website for that. And they also say that is your responsibility to protect your Steam account, because I'm sure that they get a lot of people complaining how their Steam accounts were hijacked. They say just make sure your login details are secure with two-factor authentication.
So take that as a PSA, kids. Use two-factor authentication at all times. What I actually think about it, so just before they launched 1.0, we were seeing real cheaters, right? We were playing a bunch and we were seeing real cheaters quite often for about 2 weeks.
Yep. We're talking full-blown cheats, people running at the
Hardcore.
speed of a motorcycle. We're talking obvious aimbots, tap, 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 dead, like 3 burst fire shots from an M16 straight to the melon, like obvious, blatant cheaters.
And at that point, I was incredibly frustrated with the game, and they had made a statement saying essentially that when you hit that manual report button at the end of your match, it's not going to do a whole lot.
Yep.
It notifies us. We're kind of just taking in this data. It's not doing a whole lot for you. And now they come out with this and say that they have that and they're reviewing them all. But why didn't they tell us that before? And when did they start actually reviewing all of them?
Right. And why would they have a report button that doesn't actually do anything?
Well, that's my thing. If they're in early access and they want us to report this so that they can get data on what they believe are a bunch of cheaters, and they're taking data on, say, Dano gets 1,000 reports. All right,
I'm just good. That's really what it's about. Like, let's be real.
I can see why they would take in that data, but unless they're transparent about that, which they're really good about being transparent, so why wouldn't they say, hey, yes, this is not doing a whole lot. What our plan is to take this data, figure out how these people are cheating, and then once we launch 1.0, we are going to have a system in place to fix that based on the data we have taken in. Anybody who's gathering data is going to take data over the course of time and then analyze that data and figure out the trends. Based on the trends of cheaters, they will then put in new systems to defend against those cheaters once 1.0 launches. But they didn't say that.
Right.
They kind of took like an old school approach, like, trust us, we've got this.
Yeah, right.
But everything else that they had done, it was just really transparent, like, this is what we're going to do. We're working on vaulting. We're working on all these things, but trust us on cheaters. We got this.
Yeah, I think the one thing I can say is that cheating is a really tricky thing because you never want to tell the cheaters what methods you're using to try to stop them, because they will immediately try to get around it. If we think back to H1Z1, for example, they were notorious for saying in every single update, they would say something like, enhance the anti-cheat methods in the game. And something so broad and so blanket that you have no idea what that meant. You don't even know if they're actually doing anything because it never seemed like cheaters were going away. But that's kind of what they would say is they would just be very vague and say like we're working on anti-cheat and that's all you need to know. But
Do these games like Call of Duty and do they have strong cheater populations?
so I think there's a difference between cheating on a PC and cheating on a console because the console is so locked down, like you cannot get into it and change system files or go, you know, into the code of the operating system of an Xbox. I mean, I'm sure you probably could if you really, really tried, but it's not so simple to do, and it's not as simple to do as if you were on a PC. So I think that console games typically have less cheaters because of that. But on
Well, don't
PC,
these do
like
these
that's
games
a little
have
bit
PC
different.
versions?
So like yeah, there's Call of Duty on PC, but it's not nearly as popular, I don't think, as a console version.
That's what I figured.
Yeah. I think that they just have to be really careful when they say what they are doing to combat cheaters because as soon as a cheater or a cheat provider reads that, they're going to adjust their tools to overcome the new enhancement that the game publisher made to the game. So they're always it seems like games are always one step behind cheaters and it's really hard to get on top because there's always a hole somewhere that they can find to get into the code to do things maliciously. It always seems that way.
I mean, there's got to be a happy medium somewhere where they let us know, like, hey, we are doing something, but not like, hey, we're doing A, B, and C.
Yeah, and I think that the Battle Eye announcement that came out a couple weeks ago on Twitter, where they said they currently have banned 1.5 million PUBG accounts. I think that's sort of the way they let people know, like, hey, we're actually doing something, is by
Yeah.
showing the numbers. They never really call out individuals and say like, oh, we banned like these people. Like, not a lot of places seem to do that, where you can go and see a list of banned player account names. What they do instead is ban in waves and ban anonymously. I know for a fact that Valve does this with their anti cheat for Counter Strike. They detect the cheat, but then wait before banning people and ban people in waves rather than just immediately banning as soon as the cheat is found because they sort of like build up and let those number of cheaters increase before banning them all at once. I don't really know exactly the theory behind that, just that they can obviously catch more people. And it makes cheaters have a little bit of a false sense of security, I think.
I think so too, because if you have this large group of people that are doing, or say it's an eight bot or what, instead of taking one at a time, one at a time, one at a time, all those people go like, yeah, that was Jimmy John or Bobby Sue who got taken out, but nobody cares because it's just one. But if you're all of a sudden got 100,000 people that have been banned because they used the one thing, you go, oh man, remember that one time
Right,
where all these people fell off the map because they used that one cheat?
right. Yeah, they like to do it in one sweeping wave, and like that would happen in Counter Strike, where suddenly you'd hear like, oh, 25,000 people got banned in this ban wave, and then you'd hear nothing for like months, for like 6 months, and then there'd be another wave of like 100,000 people banned. But I think the number of 1.5 million already having been detected versus or probably something at like just over 30 million copies sold, like that's a lot of cheaters. Like that's just the number of cheaters that have actually been detected and banned. And we're still seeing cheaters almost, every 5 games or so, if not more than
Yeah.
that.
And I think that people are starting to kind of like rag on Battle Eye, but Battle Eye is no like little fish. Like they're good at what they do.
Right.
I think that people are just frustrated with it because the game is so big and there are a lot of cheaters. And um, there's also the issues with the tick rate and things like that. But I think that when it comes to detecting these cheats, I think that PlayerUnknown did a really good job of kind of explaining it. Like, yeah, we do have so many layers of how this works, and it is
Hmm.
already detected within the code of the game and prevention and closing loops and things like that. But we need to do our part and actually report correctly as well.
Hmm.
So a lot of people who get their pride hurt when they suck or they get mad when the game glitches out and they just want to report everybody, that's not helping them collect accurate data.
Totally nailed it. Yeah.
And recently I haven't done it as much, but I do go like, I'll let that one slide. I
Hmm.
really don't know, but whatever.
Yeah. And I think it also is because the game has 100 people in it. Like, if you think of a Counter-Strike match that's 5 versus 5, 10 people in the game, like, chances of you finding a cheater in a Counter-Strike game are much lower because there's only 10 people versus 100. So
Right.
every single match you go in, there's 99 other people that could potentially be cheating, and there's a greater probability based on statistics and chance that there will be a cheater in this type of game versus a game where it's just you versus 9 other people. So I think that's also something that people think that maybe don't realize, but it's something that you have to take into account when you're thinking about, wow, there's so many cheaters in this game. Well, that might not be true. It's just that there's a lot of people in the current match you're in, so therefore the chance of a cheater being there is higher. And I think this is a good segue into our next topic, which is a video from WTF Moses about tick rate.
He was kind of going through and talking about how terrible the tick rate for PUBG is compared to other popular games like Fortnite or Call of Duty World War II and H1Z1, I think was the other one, and discussing how that kind of affects players and their experiences, which I didn't really notice. I didn't identify that this was the problem until I had seen this. But again, I don't know that much about games and what tick rates really meant before I watched this.
So yeah, in this video, he started off by showing a chart that compared PUBG, Fortnite, and H1Z1, and looked specifically at the server send rate, which is the tick rate. So if we look at PUBG, the minimum tick rate is 2 hertz, all the way up to a maximum of 31 hertz with an average of 18. Fortnite Battle Royale comes in at a minimum of 7 hertz, a maximum of 30 hertz, and an average of 19. So those are pretty similar, and I think that probably has to do with the fact that both of those games run on the Unreal Engine 4. The weird thing is that PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds drops all the way down to 2 hertz minimum. H1Z1 King of the Kill, on the other hand, has a minimum of 16 tick, a maximum of 148, and an average of 76. But we know that there's more to this story than just minimums and maximums. So he also dove into a graph which looks at the tick rate over time. And you can see this thing just bouncing all over the place. So when you start a match, your tick rate is all the way down at around 2. As the match progresses and things happen, it spikes up and down, seemingly randomly. I don't really have a visual of what's happening in the game versus the tick rate that is being registered. But it looks like this tick rate goes all over the place, and then it starts to trend upward as the game comes to its conclusion and there are fewer people in the match. And I think that might be one of the biggest things that affects tick rate, and I could be wrong, but it seems like if there's fewer people in the match, the tick rate generally seems to be higher. The tick rate fluctuates from 2 ticks up to 31 ticks, and it averages about 18. So for reference point, as someone who's played Counter-Strike for a very long time, the official matchmaking servers in Counter-Strike are 64 tick. And if you have played Counter-Strike at all, you probably have heard people complaining about 64 being too low. So this kind of gives you some perspective. A lot of the Counter-Strike tournaments are played at 128 tick. So that kind of gives you some perspective on how low 2 ticks might be. As much as I like to draw comparisons between Counter-Strike and PUBG, I don't think it's fair to compare them when we're talking about tick rate. These games are very, very different. We have PUBG on one hand that supports 100 players in a wide open world map, and we have Counter-Strike that only supports, I think it's something like 32 or maybe 64 players max, but your typical Counter-Strike experience is a 5 versus 5 game mode in a very small, constrictive map. They're not the same thing. And because Counter-Strike's maps are so small, you can support a higher tick rate because just less is happening. You have 10 players versus 100 players, and you don't have the inventory management and all of the vehicles and everything else that's happening in PUBG happening in Counter-Strike. Counter-Strike is also a Twitch-based shooter. And by that I mean it's very reliant on accurate reporting from client to server. Whether or not you got a headshot determines the round entirely. And when you're playing a game like Counter-Strike that has tournaments for, $300,000, $500,000 purses, you have to have a game engine and a tick rate that is extremely accurate. If a shot hits but doesn't register, that could change the course of an entire game, one single shot. And you could argue the same is true for PUBG. However, there's a lot more randomness in PUBG too. So, I mean, I think we could probably have an entire episode comparing these games because they are so different. And I like to bring up Counter Strike a lot just because I'm so proficient in it and I know it inside and out. But when we talk about tick rate, we can't really compare these games because they're just too different. There's just too much going on in PUBG compared to Counter Strike, and it's not fair to compare them. Counter Strike is a game that's been around since literally the 90s, since probably before some of our listeners were born. And it's not fair to compare a game that has been perfected and, in my opinion, is nearly perfect to a game that came out in March of this year and is an entirely separate game mode and a separate engine that has not proven itself yet to be esports ready.
And if you can kind of wrap your head around the idea that Brendan Green wants this to be an esports game and understanding how low of a tick rate that this actually is compared to what it needs to be in order to be ready for such a thing. And I think that it was Battle Nonsense that was doing all of the data that WTF Moses got his information from. And I watched that video as well. And that was a little too technical for me, but he has a video set up. So it's like a preliminary video to watch before you watch that video. And then it makes total sense. So we'll put that in links below so that you guys can check out all three of those videos. But when you're really thinking about how this affects people like us playing those games, one, we're not at the what did you say was 100?
Yeah, 64 is the official matchmaking tick rate for Counter Strike.
Yeah, we would never be able to hit that with these kinds of servers. But that kind of brought up the fact of why is the tick rate so low at this point? And there are a lot of different ideas about that, and everybody's kind of been talking about all the players in China and how that kind of affects the players in China playing on the North American servers and how that affects tick rate and things like that. So do you have like some more insight into that and how that actually plays a role in that?
So I don't know the technical side of things, but I do know that tick rate being so low is the cause of you dying when you think you're already behind a wall or a very delayed pickup of items. Anything where there's a slight delay, that's the server communicating with your client to check and make sure that what happened on your screen is actually happening in the game in the server.
Which is a big part of that hit registration, right?
Exactly, hit registration, picking up items. They actually, so I'm getting off topic a little bit, but they actually released a update recently that focused on hit registration not always registering at long distance shots. So I don't know what really played into that. That could have been a separate issue, but it made me think about tick rate possibly having something to do with that. Maybe the bullet doesn't register leaving the gun, or maybe it disappears in midair or something crazy. I'm not really sure exactly how the Unreal Engine works, but this was something that they were looking at was hit registration, and tick rate I think does really play into that.
Well, imagine all those times now where we're probably sitting there on a hill trying to scope people and take long shots and things like that, and you think that you're like, man, I'm hitting the hell out of this guy. Why am I not doing any damage, or why is he not knocked, or anything? That might have been the issue where we didn't know that that was the issue before.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like maybe that has been the issue the entire time, and we just didn't think that there was a technical error in the game for it.
Yeah, and we know that they changed the hitboxes, the damage dealt to certain areas of the body. So, for instance, maybe we would think that maybe our bullet hit the hand and only did, 30% of the damage it would normally do, or something like that. So maybe we would think, oh, maybe I just need to hit one more time because I'm so far away from my target. But the reality was that bullet wasn't even registering at all. Because there's been times where I've hit a guy probably 5, 6, maybe even 7 times that I've counted, and then they still are running and it didn't down them. So,
or at the end of the game, your hit points are super low and you know that you were just nailing people, and they have the blood spurt and they have all that stuff. And that's incredibly frustrating for players like me that are new to this.
yeah.
And it kind of makes you think like, man, I really suck. Or, I do suck, but at other times, like, that you're doing better than you are showing.
Yeah.
And even today we kind of dropped in and I was running at like 15 frames a second, like jumping all over the place and couldn't pick a damn thing up. And it was just really frustrating to kind of jump into a game that's been getting better. And now all of a sudden seems to be kind of getting a little bit worse and worse when it comes to dropping in early game and picking things up on time. And being where you want to be and then all of a sudden being 20 feet in a different area.
Yeah, we've especially noticed this when you're riding as a passenger in a vehicle. This happened the other night on stream. I don't know if you guys caught it, but I was riding as a passenger in the Bronco and Steve was driving. And on my screen, we drove right into a bus stop. Like the vehicle sparked, damage. Like it didn't deal damage, but you heard the impact sound. The vehicle jerked, around. But then all of a sudden, a split second later, we're driving in an open field and nothing
Yep.
happened. And on Steve's
That
screen, he
happens all
said
the
he went
time.
right by it, and it does. It happens all the time because this is the tick rate problem. Like we bounce back to talking about hit registration, but back to tick rate. Like it's all one giant thing. It's all wrapped together in this one issue. I think it all stems to the fact that the servers are not communicating quick enough with the client.
Yeah, and I think that kind of brings up this idea. At one point, if I remember correctly, um, in the video and before this, they had talked about how um, they wanted to try to implement a lock on ping or something like that, so that you could limit the server that you were playing in, right?
Yeah, so the idea of a ping lock is that people with a certain number of ping would not be able to play with others because their ping is too high. So if my ping is 50 and yours is 300, you would not be able to play with me. And that's just a limitation in the game, built in, hard coded, that would physically block you from joining the same server as someone with 50 ping.
But that's not the same. So what's the issue here of people saying that this has to do with China? Because didn't Brendan Green in that H3 um, interview say that he used to do that for, what was it, Arma all the time? He would just kick people out if they had too high or too low of a ping.
Yeah, and this is where my technical limitations come in as far as my knowledge. But what I understand is that when someone with a really high ping joins a server with lower ping people, for something happens and it makes it so that the person with the high ping actually perceives the gameplay being very smooth, but the people with the low ping perceive that person as being jumping around all over the place, and potentially accusations come into play because they're moving around erratically.
That's
I don't
super
know
interesting.
why this happens, but I know for a fact that that is the result of a very high ping player playing with someone with a very low ping on the same server.
So is that safe to assume that every time we jump into a game and we go, "Oh my God, what is happening right now?" then we can assume that somebody is in that server with an incredibly high ping?
I think that's safe to say if you see someone, jittering, all of a sudden popping in and out of a corner, moving around sort of erratically, there's a good chance that they have a high ping. I know this just from playing a lot of multiplayer games where this is what you see when people have high pings. But if you're the guy with a high ping, it doesn't always look that way for you. But I think that there's a lot of variables and probably a lot more technical stuff going on. And plus, we don't know what our ping is. Like they don't show that anywhere.
Right.
A lot of other multiplayer games do show what your ping is, so you can tell if you're the guy with a high ping or not. And high ping could just happen also if your wife starts watching Netflix, all of a sudden your ping might go through the roof because you cannot communicate with the server fast enough. So there's a lot of variables at play, and I wish I knew more about this. So I encourage you to go check out that Battle Nonsense video. Do some research for yourself because I unfortunately do not have the technical skills to really break this down and explain really what's happening here. But that information is out there. People are looking into it, and it's really interesting to figure out, why is what you're seeing in the game actually happening. Click the links below, and you will start your journey of enlightenment. But the good news is that PlayerUnknown has recognized the issue. I mean, everyone who plays this game feels the horrible performance at the start of the matches. Everyone knows that when you try to get into a car, you have to hit F multiple times to get into it. You have problems where you can't pick up items the first time you go to click them. Players are moving around erratically. All of this is recognized, and I think that this is something they're working on, although they haven't really officially said it. I think there's really nothing else that they've announced. So I'm going to assume, hopefully, I'm correct, that this is a high priority issue for them.
Well, I mean, there's no doubt that it is. I think that if you just listen to the way it's a little weird because like while the devs have Twitter accounts, you don't hear from them a ton, you know?
Right.
Um, You hear from Player Unknown a lot, but it's very strategic. But when he's there, he's very genuine. He's really passionate about the game, which is wonderful. But now that this is in 1.0 and we've gotten a couple little fixes here and there, nothing, crazy. Um, we are starting to see real issues, whereas before we understood it was a broken game. And I think maybe soon we're going to start seeing people getting really, really angry about it all because I don't want the game to stagnate. Oh man, it seems like it's stagnating. Let's just go find a different thing right now.
Yeah, and we've seen people write mean things on Reddit or other forums about this kind of thing where they're saying, "Oh, I had a lot of faith in this game and I've played it for a really long time, but now these little bugs that I thought that they would address one day have been going on for too long and it's driving me away from the game." And I think
Right.
that's reasonable. I mean, it's reasonable to expect that a game that has been released since March and they're now calling it 1.0 like full release. You'd think that these things would be ironed out by now, and they're not. And
And let's kind of
that's a problem.
disseminate that from what we were saying last week. Last week we go, there are certain things that you have to understand 1.0 is going to give you.
Yeah.
Vaulting is done. New map is done. Overhaul on ballistics done. These things that they said that they wanted to do, they've done.
Right.
Now when you come into it and we jump into a game and I am literally unable to do anything and just hide in a corner until my computer stops freaking out, that's not on my computer.
Yeah.
That's on the game.
That's on the game. Because any other single A, double A, triple A title, whatever you want to call it, is going to be optimized to the point of you not getting 10 FPS with your GTX 1050 Ti. Like, that's not a horrible card. Like, you should be getting better performance. You have an i7. It's a couple years old, but you still have an i7, 8 gigs of RAM, and a 1050 Ti. That is a decent middle of the range machine. And it is
Right.
not the fault of your computer. It's 100% the fault of the game that you're getting horrible performance.
When I can essentially sit there and play a fully optimized game like Assassin's Creed at the highest settings and then jump into PUBG and go, damn it.
Yeah.
That's when I go, this is not me.
Yeah.
Yeah, while I could have a better computer, great. This game has certain things that I would like them to prioritize a little higher. And if that means finding a way to get people to play at the same or general ping rate, great. I'm
Yeah.
all for it. Just because I want to play a game smoothly.
Cool. I think we can move on. That was a good, but maybe slightly not very informed to talk about ping rate. I wish I knew more about it, but I know I can steer you guys in the right direction towards people who do know more about it. It's just not my expertise. So please check
That's
out
fair.
the comments. Check out the videos in the show notes in the description of this video, and you guys can learn more about what we're talking about.
Word. So the next topic that we wanted to talk about was that the Polygon interview that gave this game a 10 out of 10.
Yes. Yeah, I have a lot to say about this. The review came out on December 20th, and its tagline is PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds is imperfectly perfect. Making a masterpiece is a messy business. And if you check out the review, we have a link to it in our description. You can see that they gave it a perfect 10 score. And they say that it was imperfectly perfect.
What does that mean?
What does that mean? So people thought the same thing. They said, what does that mean? A 10 out of 10 score? How could this be? So they actually had a small podcast, about a 25-minute video. It wasn't a video, it was actually an audio interview with the author of this article. And he went on and sort of defended / explained his reasoning behind giving it a perfect 10 score. And some of the things he said, I think makes sense, but I don't necessarily agree with all of them. He basically said that the reason why this game is so great is because it's fun, really. That's what it came down to. He said that even though it has some broken elements, those broken elements don't ruin the experience. The core integrity of the game has always been there from the beginning and has always been enjoyable.
I feel like that statement right there, you go, Yes, I agree. This game brings me a lot of joy. I thoroughly enjoy it. You and I get to work together. We spend hours just hanging out, talking, catching up, playing this game, getting our hearts racing, being let down, all this stuff. But
But dum dum
it is
dum,
it is broken.
it's very broken. And
So,
we just spent the first half of this podcast explaining that it was broken, and then everyone knows it's broken.
and I'm not here to kind of like rag on this. I think that this was put out into the internet, and now we get the luxury of kind of talking about whether or not we do agree with the idea of this 10 out of 10 being a real thing
Yep. They
with
said
so
that
many issues.
they said that imperfections, well, and by they I mean the author of this review, said that imperfections do not prevent something from being truly great. And I would agree with that statement overall. Like, I think the United States is a great place to live. It has major imperfections. But on the whole, if you step back and look at it with a very broad, wide angle lens, things seem pretty great. But up close, you see the imperfections. And the imperfections are the things we've been talking about from the very beginning of this episode, which is, the horrible optimization, the terrible tick rate, the not so consistent gameplay experience. Every time you open a match, there almost seems like this one's really jerky and terrible, but the last one was a little bit more smooth. There's major bugs. There's holes in the map that you can fall into and can't run out of. There's little edges of the map where you get stuck. You can somehow jump. This happened to us. Jump over your teammate and get stuck between the teammate and the wall, and then die to the
Oh my
gas in a
God.
top 10 situation. These things should not happen in a game that is a AAA title that is fully released and has been gameplay tested for hours and hours. These things are imperfections. And when you look at these things and when you experience these things game after game after game, I don't see how it's possible to call it a perfect game. That's my experience.
Let me play devil's advocate here. Have you had more fun playing another video game in recent memory?
That would be no. This is the most fun I've had since I bought it.
Exactly. So, if you take the idea of this game and everything that comes with it and everything that you and I specifically have been able to do with it, would you give this a 10 out of 10?
As far as the concept and the core game mechanics, such as the gunplay, the character movement, the vehicles, how you as a character interact with the world, I would probably give that a 10 out of 10 because
Right.
I think the concept of the game is perfect. He has
And
worked on this for years and years and years and refined the hell out of it. And this is the product of his, countless hours of testing and thinking up the way Battle Royale should be. So that is a 10 out of 10.
exactly. And I think that if we start to think of this particular review as a feelings based review and like understanding it the way that people who play the game like we do play it, that is the perfect review. But for people who are just looking to play games and have those games work for them, I was talking to you earlier. I said I would give this game a 6.5 if I were somebody who were just reviewing a video game that was sent out.
Mm-hmm.
If it were us, I feel like now that we're talking about this and like really thinking about it, like, okay, the way that we play this, the way that we analyze it, the way that we talk about it, this has given me an experience that I would rank a 10 out of 10. But the game is not a 10 out of 10. It is not a masterpiece. It is not perfect.
Yep. It's
And
not.
so if we think about it as two different aspects of it, I can get on board with this review and I can say you guys are crazy.
It almost like it needs two separate scores. It needs a concept, what it is going to become once they're done, and then they need a score based on the current implementation of it. And it's just not done. And that's the problem.
Because when you say problem, it's a problem for us. It is not a problem that they put it out.
Yeah.
It's not a problem that they told people it's a 10 out of 10. That's irrelevant. We're just here to talk about a video game.
Yeah.
Like,
And I guess when it comes down to is what is a game? It is something you play for fun. And does PUBG fulfill that? Do you have fun playing the game? I mean,
hell yeah.
as an artistic uh, medium or whatever you want to call it, as a work of art, as an object, as something someone has created, can you call it perfect? No. But I've not, like you said, I've not had any other game provide me with this much fun
Because
in
even if you
the
think about
recent
it
memory.
outside of this, sorry to cut you off.
That's all I
If
had.
you think about this, this is not only a game. This has gotten you and I to hang out more. This has gotten a group of people that we had hung out with separately to hang out together now and create a group of friends. We have now been able to do this podcast together and branch out to watch other Twitch streamers to do things together. So because of this broken game that I would give a 6.5, I have had a 10 out of 10 experience.
Boom. You wrapped it up, man. Seriously, like that's totally it. That's totally it. Like I didn't even think about it that way. Like because of this game, we have reconnected, we've talked to and met tons of different people. We get the privilege of streaming for you guys. Like it's opened up like a whole new world for us pretty much. And like I wouldn't even call us like wildly famous or successful or anything like that, but it's just something fun that we're doing because we're so passionate about this game. And who cares what the score is at the end of the day, you know? I think it's pretty valid to say that the fun you have in the game is what makes it great. And that's about
So
it.
thank you, Polygon. Thank you. You're a 10 out of 10 in our hearts.
10 out of 10. 10 out of 10. One thing he said, and I wanted to touch on this real quick, was he said, do not play the Xbox version. His review was specifically for the PC, and he thought that the Xbox version is next to unplayable, was his words. And I would love to know how this game plays on Xbox, but I don't have one. So if you guys do and you want to chime in and let us know how it runs for you guys, we would love to talk about that some more in depth once we have some more information about it.
Seriously, and if you have an Xbox and a PC and you have played them both, we would actually really love to hear what you have to say about that. So if you have the ability to actually record your audio, maybe we would be able to interview you. I think that would be super enjoyable for our viewers. So just reach out to us and let us know if you've played both versions.
Absolutely, absolutely. The other thing he said was that it's not about map mastery like a game like Battlefield or Call of Duty is. I remember playing Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, and I was actually one who bought that at like midnight, launch night, and that was like the only game I've ever bought as soon as it came out. But I remember if you don't get into the Call of Duty or Battlefield type games from the start, you're screwed because you don't know the map and you will get absolutely demolished by everyone else who has been playing it since day one. PUBG is not that way. Because it's open world and because the circle changes and every single round is different, you don't have to memorize the map in order to be successful at the game. And I think that's what makes it really accessible. And it feels more like a single player experience, is what the author said. And I completely agree with him because you aren't just following what you should be doing. You can actually follow whatever you want to do in the game. If you can follow your whims, is what he said. You don't have to rely on your Twitch reflexes all the time. There's not those instant reloads or instant respawns happening all around you. It's not super fast paced. You can kind of play it how you want to play it, and that's what makes it different.
That's why those games aren't very appealing to me, is like the constant respawns. And I'm terrible at first person shooters. You know this. I remember I bought Battlefield 1 just before I got into this game because I was like, I will make myself play a first-person shooter. And I liked the campaign of the game. It was super awesome. And then I played some deathmatch stuff and Capture the Flag, and it was just too fast-paced. You don't learn a lot. There's not a whole lot of strategy. If you know the map, you're good at the map.
Yep.
You run around, you shoot people, you die. You run around, you shoot people, you die. This game, I can put 20 minutes into a round and not die, and then I die and I go, ooh, that's where I messed up, and then I'll do something totally different the next time.
Yep. Yep.
Or in the middle of the game, we'll go, okay, now we're hunting drops. This is just what we're doing now. This is where we live.
Yeah. There's actually been a lot of times in the middle of matches where we've said, what are we doing? Like, this is not a good idea. Let's just leave. Let's just reevaluate our whole approach to this match because we are stretching ourselves too thin and maybe taking a battle that we shouldn't be taking.
Yep.
That's happened really recently, actually, a couple times.
We keep taking these battles where there are two people on either side of us, and we're just trying to shoot them. Like, oh, I almost had them a minute ago, so now I got to finish it off. It's that important, and you go, you know what? Let's run. Let's get out of here because this is not a good spot to stand in.
Exactly. Yeah, I think this is something. This is sort of turning into a tip in a way, like a hot tip. But when you're fighting
hot
someone,
tip.
Hot tip.
Wait, we
hot
need
drop,
the sound.
Hot tip.
Hot tip, hot drop. Hot drop tip. Tippity drop.
We need a soundbite for this. We need like
Bee Palace.
banana packs. This is your hot drop banana pack of the day. So when you're fighting from mid range and maybe like you're behind a tree and your enemy's behind a rock or something where they have cover, if you hit them a couple times and you're thinking, oh man, I just got to get one more hit on them. When they duck back into cover, they're healing. Like they're going to pop back out of cover the next time with 100% health or 75% if they don't take a boost. So it doesn't really make sense to keep fighting and keep peeking them when you're half damaged and you're like waiting for them to pop out again.
And we're all guilty of it because
Always.
you want that kill. You want those little red letters to show up and say that you got that person, but it's not worth it. You want to survive and eat that chicken dinner when you're done, homie.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Hot drop, hot tip.
Hot drop, hot tip. With Dano and Cody. What else we got? That's kind of the main things we wanted to cover. Like I said, if you guys want to know more about tick rate, go watch those videos that I posted in the description because we're not experts in technology whatsoever. I just know the results of what I see in the game and what a low tick rate means for me. I don't know how a game, communicates with server to client, but I understand what the results are, and I understand that we need some improvement in that area. But if you want to learn the technical details, there's people out there on YouTube and all over Reddit that are pretty knowledgeable about the topic, so you can go learn
Check
about
out
that
the
yourself.
links below.
Yep, that's it. That's pretty much it. Nailed it.
Check out the links below.
That was, so I said about a paragraph where you could have said, check out the links below. 5 words. Whatever. We got there in the end. Anything else to add?
I just really enjoyed doing this.
What's even better, though, is live streaming. And I've got to say, you guys showed up last Wednesday, and it was an absolutely incredible time. I don't know what you thought, Cody.
I thought it was a blast. I wasn't able to check out the chat as easily, so I didn't interact as much, but it was just a lot of fun knowing that we were playing and not even doing that well, but having more fun than we usually do just because people were chatting with us and talking and really interacting. And that was just a new experience for us. So thank you for those of you who are watching, who are actually there. And if you would like to see us play and kind of hang around, we've got a lot of cool stuff planned in the next coming months. So check us out at HOTDROP_podcast on Twitch. Links below. We will be streaming Wednesday nights 8 p.m. to 11 p.m. and Sunday nights 8 p.m. to 11 p.m. Please hang out with us at HOTDROP_podcast. It was a pleasure talking to everybody in the chats. We can't wait to keep on doing that.
I think streaming really brings a whole new element to the game. And when we were playing today ourselves just in duos, it almost felt like something was missing because we didn't have anyone else to talk to. So just to have you guys there and act as an audience and just interact with us is something really special. I think it's something I've never experienced before, and it really made us feel pretty good to have people that like what we're doing and want to see more of us and to be able to interact with us live. So I keep saying it, but I really thank you guys for coming out, and I really look forward to what we're planning in the future.
Perfect. So again, streaming Wednesdays and Sundays. I promise you that replay and strategy episode will be coming soon once we get the time to work on that. Until then, thank you again, and we'll see you in game.